Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pulse Teachings. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back to my channel. I hope this finds you doing well. I am going to chat with you today about Pluto retrograde. So Pluto went retrograde May 2nd, very recently from when I am putting this up. If you are new to astrology, we use this word retrograde when it looks like from our position here in Earth in relation to the universe, cosmos, archetypes that we work with in these planets and celestial objects. It looks like the planet is moving backwards from our perspective. It is not actually moving backwards, but because it looks like that, that absolutely influences how we work with the archetypal energy. And in this instance, we are talking about Pluto. So I am an evolutionary astrologer, and in evolutionary astrology, Pluto is extremely important. Pluto is always important, whether we're practicing traditional astrology, more modern astrology, evolutionary astrology. I practice Western astrology. So Pluto's always important. And yet in evolutionary astrology, Pluto's extremely important because it really speaks to the collective undertones of an age, of various ages. So we are all part of a particular Pluto generation because Pluto moves so slowly. It's one of the generational planets, just like Uranus. We have Uranus generation as well. And so Pluto's important because it speaks to the energies of a time. And we are in an incredible moment in Pluto's journey because Pluto has been in this process of shifting from Capricorn into the sign of Aquarius. And Pluto's in Aquarius right now. It's gone retrograde at 2 degrees of Aquarius. It is going to go back into Capricorn for the last time. So while Pluto goes retrograde every year, this year, 2024, is very particular because this is it. Pluto is going to station retrograde. It's going to re-enter Capricorn on September 1st. It's going to continue in its retrograde path until October 11th when it's going to station direct. Then it's going to station direct. It's going to be at 29 degrees and 38 minutes. So it's just a dip back into Capricorn, but that dip is going to be significant. And then it's going to station direct, and it will come back into Aquarius on November 19th, 2024. And that's it. And then even when Pluto goes retrograde again, it will not dip back into Capricorn. So this is a very important Pluto retrograde because it is the end. It's the end of the Pluto and Capricorn age generation. And on a deeper, kind of bigger cycle, it's also absolutely signaling some of the shifts that when we talk about the age of Aquarius, we're not in the age of Aquarius yet, but we are in the transition into the age of Aquarius, and Pluto coming into Aquarius is absolutely bringing up some of the soul cycles, energies, themes that we are going to be working with as humans for a very, very long time. And so when we're talking, however, about Pluto and Aquarius, we're talking about it's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, and then it moves into its next sign, which will be Pisces. So firstly, how this transit impacts us, like any transit, always depends upon our chart. So especially if you have anything in your natal chart from 2 degrees of Aquarius back to 29 degrees of Capricorn, okay? And then you would apply that for the opposition and the square, okay? So if you have something at 2 degrees of Scorpio or 1 degree of Scorpio or 29 degrees of Libra, you're in a Pluto transit, okay, with whatever you have in your chart there. And especially if you have something, especially at, 1 degree, 0 degrees, 29 degrees there, you're going to feel it. You're probably already feeling it, right? And so where you are in your Pluto transit, if you have something at 29 degrees of Capricorn or 29 degrees of Cancer or Libra or Aries, you're finishing your Pluto transit. If you have something at 2 degrees of Aquarius, you're just welcome. It's just beginning. Okay. And so, but regardless of what we have or where we have it, if you have that, this is working very personally with you. Okay. If you don't have anything, it's still a very significant transit. And we are going to feel this in our own lives and absolutely in the collective. Pluto is always working with the collective, and we as individuals in these microcosms of the dramas and the stories of our lives are always echoes and ripples of these much greater thematic stories, dramas, energies that are working archetypally with the collective. And there could be a lot going on. Okay, so we are moving from Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. We are moving from an air sign of higher mind consciousness, of visionary glimpses into the evolution of the collective, an evolution of the collective that in Aquarius is felt very personally. Okay, especially if you have planets, angles at those first few degrees of Aquarius, whatever is coming up for you right now, whatever major changes you are feeling in your identity, in your life, those are aligned to this collective change. And so especially if a lot's been coming up, you can reflect on how whatever you're having to let go of, because Pluto wants us to let go. Pluto is transformation. So whatever is being transformed in our lives, this is aligned to something so much bigger than us. And so that might also bring a bit of comfort and also a bit of potential confidence if you're being asked to let go of something or confront a fear that you've always kind of known was there, but you kind of did this and sidestepped around it. And now it's like, whew, okay, fear, let's be friends, right? There's a bigger alignment, and that's why we are individually being called to come into these changes. And so Pluto is transformation. Whenever we have a Pluto transit, it is death and rebirth. That happens sometimes literally, sometimes emotionally, psychologically, sometimes various realms are present at once. But it asks us to go through a process, and when we are done that process, we are different. We have transformed. We have shed a layer of our psyche, and we are changed. And that's why when we have a personal Pluto transit, our life usually changes significantly. Our path usually changes. And so right now we're talking about this Pluto who's moving from this visionary, evolutionary energy of Aquarius back into Capricorn, back into an earth sign, back into a sign that is connected to the ways that we have constructed our social realm, to the ways that we have made sense of the boundaries in society, and then the ways that we as individuals relate to those social, I wanted to say social barriers, because oftentimes those social boundaries are barriers, especially to particular people of particular cultures or class status or gender. And Pluto, through, the shift of Pluto from Capricorn into Aquarius, which began in March of 2023, has really been this juxtaposition of how there is absolutely a collapse in those social paradigms that we in the modern world in the West have built a society around, and then the way that we have as individuals have constructed identities in relationship to the social realms, even if we radically have disagreed and been in a subversive cultural, community from our early 20s, if not before. We are still impacted by the dominant social realms. And that's Athena. She just did this like under the camera situation, but she didn't move anything, so we're grateful. And so this shift of Pluto from Aquarius into Capricorn and back and forth, and now we're in the final movement of it. Absolutely, we are seeing how the social structures are just not sustaining our current world, are not sustaining the new forms of justice that Aquarius wants the collective to have, that Aquarius wants us to establish new social organizations, new understandings, new communities, new economies, new ways of being social beings. And Pluto moving through Aquarius is 20 years, and it sounds great. It sounds wonderful. We can have the progressive justice collective. There will be so much resistance, and there will be so much of whether we use the word shadow or the lower frequency of Aquarius coming through as Pluto makes its final move into Aquarius. And we will see, if we think we've seen the age of social media, self-proclaimed gurus, I don't think we've seen anything yet, right? And we're going to see a lot, and we're going to see, more collapse, and we're going to see incredible things happen in community and in solidarity and in justice. And it's messy. Pluto is messy. And so as we are being conscious and working with Pluto, we can be conscious of how, as Pluto moves in September into Capricorn, and in the time leading up to that, what in our life have we not fully let go of in terms of how we ourselves have identified in terms of those outdated power structures, those outdated ideas of identity built on success, where that idea of success was actually constructed by a very small group of people in the social history of the West. And even though there might be different types of people in power, and even though there might be different genders, the idea of power as a power over, as a climb to the top of the ladder, as be born into various privilege, and that's how you get there. All the social narratives that have nothing to do with our pulsing heart, in connection with the divine, in connection with truly being present, truly being embodied, that have nothing to do with being in such a place of earth consciousness in our bodies, through our bodies, that we intuit a sacred rhythm of natural boundaries related to the earth. That's Capricorn. Capricorn is elder wisdom. It is bone deep knowledge of cycles and boundaries between what is known and unknown, and the way that those boundaries are not static, but that they shift. And that we can actually, as Pluto moves into this last dip into Capricorn, and in the months leading up, especially as it's retrograde through Aquarius, we can come into thinking about how we want our lives to be structured not around outdated ideas of identity and success that most likely, if you're listening to this and you're into evolutionary astrology, you don't really agree with. Even if you have spent years or decades of our lives, in those realms, working in those realms, there is still the awareness and the calling and the knowledge, and it's in the body and it's in the psyche and it's in the heart, that there's another way that we could be organizing this human journey. There's those moments of breakthrough. And breakthrough moments, that's Aquarius energy. Those moments when we just intuit and we see and we understand, and we have the whole vision. And then we're back and you know, we have to kind of make the plans and we have to work with it. And we have to remember that we are in this material realm, and that's part of being human. And so all of these themes and these ideas, you know, they may be churning up. The other thing about Pluto is we often hear some certain words associated with Pluto, like shadow, like fear, trauma, obsessions. And for sure, that's part of Pluto. I am writing a book right now on Pluto that helps to bring some different lenses into talking and working with Pluto. And so when Pluto is retrograde, of course, we can come in, especially if you have personal transits going on, okay? As Pluto goes retrograde and whatever archetype Pluto is talking to you, it might unearth aspects of the self. This really depends upon what house you have these first degrees of Aquarius and last degree of Capricorn in. But absolutely, as Pluto is retrograde, it might unearth aspects of ourself that we have had fear in relationship to, that, you know, and we often hear it's like, there's I'm sorry. I am laughing. There's so much out there about shadow work that I laugh at. And I laugh at this as like someone that just published a book on complex childhood trauma. Like, I laugh at this as someone that comes from the depths of childhood violence and trauma. And I just, folks, I don't buy it. Like, so much of the rhetoric of shadow, in the way that it's done in a social media realm now, like, of course, there's truth to it. And there's a Jungian tradition of working with shadow. And yet we do not have to turn around and like hold our gaze on something that we've been afraid of, and be like, even as I say that, I'm not going to talk about it more, because it's a paradigm that's based in the very Capricorn idea of control and identity that Aquarius and Pluto and Aquarius wants to bust open, wants to say doesn't work. And so a different way of thinking, if, you know, especially if things are coming up, you know, firstly, of course, we get support. You get a therapist, you have your friends, you join the Cosmic Rhythms group, and you bring it all into evolutionary astrology with us. But we find supports. And this is why astrology can be such a beautiful companion, because we have the archetypal language, which psychology is often lacking. And we can sit with it. And we don't need to force ourselves. And this is going to be really taking us into a quintessential Capricorn wisdom, as it's at the 29th degree, that we can access this wisdom that comes from the body, and we actually don't need to translate it into words. We don't need to translate it into story. If that impulse comes, then of course, journal, talk with it. But bringing ritual into our lives, ritual as you work with Pluto retrograde, you know, if there's an intention of, I want to let go of this, go into nature, you know, while it's in Aquarius, maybe be with birds as they're flying, and see what the birds have to share with you. Give your intention to them to take it through air as we're in Capricorn and Earth. Work with roots, or work with mulch, and like put your intentions into the mulch, and doing this in an embodied way with the elements, and the elements that are being activated is an incredible way of finding support and belonging and transformation. And so, you know, often I actually don't agree with a lot of what is said about Pluto and shadow, because in my experience, for myself and all the people I've worked with over the years, we know what's here. We know what we don't want to see. We know what we're afraid to say. It's not like we know. Even if we don't have words for it, even if it's just embodied memory, which is the deepest in memory, we know, but we have been so conditioned by societal norms, and then the way that those norms trickle into our personal lives and our family conditionings, to ignore what we know, to ignore who we know ourselves to be. And it's actually unlearning the learned process to ignore what is pulsing and what is calling that we feel in our body. That's the work. Because often what we really have to turn around and see in the shadow is our sweet, beautiful child self, who somewhere along the line, for a lot of different reasons, got taught to be silenced. And that doesn't mean that we haven't done things we might hold shame for, or that we have people that we need to ask forgiveness for. That doesn't mean that we're all perfect and innocent. Pluto is so messy. Pluto is all of it. Pluto is victimization, and also where we've leaned into having too much power. It's all of it. Pluto doesn't create categories of attachment theory. It doesn't say this is good and this is bad. It doesn't say that you should be like this so that you can be normal. That is human studies of psychology that in the 70s were appropriated into psychology, into astrology. And while some wonderful things came out of that, there was also some loss of the depths of the archetypes, because the archetypes are living, they are not static, and they cannot be contained within, especially like 200 years of Western constructs of thought. They're deeper. And so as we work with Pluto in this retrograde, which is going to turn things up individually and collectively, is wanting to take things up so that we can actually establish new foundations for new paradigms that are not going to come overnight. Remember, we're 20 years with Aquarius, okay? But there can be joy with Pluto. There can be the joy that comes when we reclaim the parts of ourselves, often quite powerful parts of ourselves, that we've simply been taught we shouldn't have. And so, yeah, that might be parts of ourselves that are messy or icky or have lived through situations that society doesn't create any space for. And Pluto is coming into Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius has some things to say about pop culture. An evolutionary astrologer who also has made a living as a media studies professor also has some things to say about pop culture, and I will talk about that at another point in time with Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius. But this is about breaking the status quo. This is about the evolution for higher mind consciousness that knows about other realms and timelines and is so far beyond any construct of identity that is in like this tiny box that comes from any social media realm or Hollywood realm that's attached to identity. This is so much bigger, and it's exciting. And I really invite you to consider that with Pluto work, we do not have to enter it with fear. Even if fear is there, we can journey alongside fear, and we do not need to push ourselves too far into it for the sake of doing whatever it is that wherever the lesson that we need to work harder has come from. Working harder and becoming uncomfortable and holding a belief that we're not supposed to experience joy, that's all Capricorn shadow. That's all what Pluto, let's let it go. It doesn't mean that life is always beautiful. No, I will take that back, because If we change our definition of beautiful, life is always beautiful. It doesn't mean that life is always pretty. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's all, you know, check off my boxes and I am a millionaire in this. But that's not Pluto. That's not the depths. That's not Aquarius. That's not Capricorn. Go into the ancient rhythms. Go into the ancient rhythms that help us establish those boundaries that are always shifting between the known and the unknown. The ancient elder wisdom that, regardless of where we come from, we have access to through our bones and through the land that we live on. In the gifts of indigenous cultures in those lands where we live on. And there's just so much wisdom in Capricorn. And so as we begin this journey back to our final days with Pluto and Capricorn, and really like in the span of Pluto, they're just days, they're moments even, they're actually just breaths, that we can really just breathe with that elder wisdom as we journey back towards September. And the journey back to September, that's going to be some churning up in the Aquarius realms, helping us to prepare to make that one last dip. And that is a lot of thoughts on Pluto retrograde. And I could keep talking, but I will stop there. And be well. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.